Okay. Okay, good morning everybody. I'm Councillor David Boyes, Chair of this committee. Welcome to the remote meeting of the Safe and Stronger Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which is taking place on the 1st of March 2021, which is being recorded live to the Council's website and will be available to be viewed for a minimum of 6 months. Please be aware that any footage from the meeting can be used in subsequent media broadcasts. I would like to give a warm welcome to members, officers and any members of the public or media who are watching this live feed of this morning. And this is our last meeting before the election. I'll have more to say about that a little bit later. With regards to the agenda, item 6, we have we have Stuart Errington, who's a member of this committee, a cooperative member, and is also the Chief Fire Officer, who's going to do a presentation on the County Durham and Darlington Fire and Rescue Authority Community Risk Management Plan for 21 to 24. And we also have Keith Wanley, who is Chair of the Safe Durham Partnership, who is going to be presenting item 7. Okay, with that, can we go to the agenda? Item 1 on the agenda is apologies for absence.
Thanks, Chair. We've got apologies from Tony Cook.
Okay. Item 2 on the agenda is substitute members.
We don't have any substitute members today, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Item 3 is the minutes of the meeting that was held on the 4th of January 2021. I'm going to go through each page individually. If anybody has anything to say, matters arising or matters of accuracy, just let me know. Page 3, page 4, which included the probation programme, page 5, page 6, page 7, which included the bonfire period activity, page 8, page 9, page 10, page 11, page 12, page 13, 14, which included the Q2 performance management report, and page 15. Jonathan, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just in relation to item 7 and item 8 of that meeting. In relation to item 8, item 7, which is on the bonfire, just for the minutes, is that there was a response sent containing the comments of members to the Chair of the Safe Durham Partnership and portfolio holders. And in relation to item 8 on the Q2 performance report, there was response circulated in relation to comments on violence against the person and reducing reoffending young people. And there was also a briefing note circulated on off-road bikes, Chair. Thank you.
Right, thank you, Jonathan. Do we have anybody else got any matters arising or matters of accuracy? If not, can we move them as a true record?
Agreed, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Okay, item 4 on the agenda is declarations of interest. If anybody's got any declaration of interest, any items that's on the agenda, I haven't been forwarded any.
Councillor Turnbull, item 6. I'm a member of the Fire Authority.
Right. Okay, that's noted, John.
Yes, I am.
Sorry. As well.
I am as well, Chairman.
That's Brian.
Brian, yes.
And who else?
Councillor Alison Beattie.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Alison. Any items from co-opted members or interested parties? If not, we'll go to item 6 on the agenda, which is the County Durham and Darlington Fire and Rescue Authority Community Risk Management Plan for 21 to 24. And this takes the place of the Integrated Risk Management Plan that we've had a iteration of the last few years as well. So I'll pass over to Stuart, who's going to take this presentation.
Thanks, Chair, and I think we've got some slides to run through. So yeah, as the chair mentioned, this committee has, for the last few years, always commented on what was our integrated risk management plan, but is now being called our community risk management plan. So if we just move to the next slide, just really wanted to outline that this consultation runs until the 23rd of March. We're really encouraging everyone to complete a response to that, members of the public in particular, and I'll explain why that's really important a little bit later. I know the committee normally does a consolidated response, but if any members wanted to do an individual response, on the last slide there's details on how you can do that. And of course we would welcome any particular views that members have as individual members, as well as part of the committee. For this year, we're running the consultation slightly shorter than what we normally do. Normally, we would run it over a 12-week period, but we wanted to wait until we saw the provisional settlement before we set the budget for this year. I think, like all public sector organisations, we've only been given a single-year funding settlement, and there was a significant amount of uncertainty about what that funding settlement from government would look and feel like. So we wanted to wait before we published our consultation. The other outer date we've got in our mind is obviously we are heading towards local elections in Durham as well, and we wanted to have the consultation finished before the Fire Authority went into purdah at the end of March, so hence why a slightly shortened consultation. We're also this year really focusing, because of the pandemic, on online consultations, so using social media, attending meetings like this remotely, but still hoping to get a really good response from the public. So if we just move on to the next slide, please. Okay, I'll just give you a little bit of a background on what a community risk management plan is. I think I said to you earlier, normally this would be called our integrated risk management plan, and in the legislation, IRMP is still the terminology. There is a new fire standard being produced though, which talks about community risk management plans. So the Fire Authority have decided to adopt that more modern terminology. Although, as I say, the legislation does still point to IRMP rather than CRMP. It is a legal requirement of the Fire Authority to produce this 3-year plan, and it must span a minimum of 3 years. The way that we approach it in Durham and Darlington, we produce a 3-year plan, but we update it every year as well. Just want to make sure it's got the latest risk information in there, the latest financial information, and it gives us the opportunity to really set out over a single year, every year, the particular areas that we want to consult the public on, and you'll see that towards the end of the presentation. The plan includes an outline of what the vision of the Fire Authority is, what our strategic priorities are, our values and behaviours, and also, quite importantly at the moment, the medium-term financial plan. So we talk about what our overall resources are, and then really the CRMP outlines just how we are going to use those resources to mitigate risk in the best possible way. In terms of how do we identify risks, well, that risk stratification process covers national risks. It's everything that is published in the National Risk Assessment. That then comes down to a local level, and the Local Resilience Forum produce a community risk register. We as a service also produce a community risk profile. So we start right at a national level, come down to a Durham and Darlington level from across all of our partner organisations, and then really hone that down into how does the Fire and Rescue Authority play into to all of those risks. As you can imagine, it covers a significant amount of risks, from dwelling fires, business fires, road traffic collisions, floods, terrorist attacks, natural disasters, etc. So a significant amount of risk information included within the plan. And then it also really importantly talks about how we as a service manage those risks and mitigate them as much as possible. And really we do that across 3 key areas. Prevention, so what do we do to keep people safe in their homes? We obviously do a significant number of safe and wellbeing visits, which this committee has looked at in detail in the past. At the last committee meeting, I talked to you again in quite a bit of detail about our arson reduction strategy as well. So that's really where a lot of our prevention work is focused, as well as on young people, schools, etc. From a protection or business fire safety perspective, obviously the Fire Authority is the enforcing authority for the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order. So that's about making sure that businesses comply with their legal requirements to keep the business safe, but also their employees or any members of the public who might be visiting that business as well. And then, of course, obviously, what we're probably best well known for is how we deal with our resources from an emergency response perspective. So where have we got those resources allocated strategically across the service area? How much resource do we put into each of those different three areas? And of course, there are a number of underpinning strategies as well about how we deal with our people, how we collaborate, how we use all of our assets, etc. So if we move on to the next slide. It's really important that we get the views of the community when we are dealing with what we need to deal with from a financial and risk perspective. Obviously, resource allocation has become very, very pertinent over the last 10 years or so as we've been dealing with austerity and we've had less government grant to work with. So really had to focus down to make sure we are as efficient and effective as possible as a fire and rescue service over that period of time. And taking the views of the public into account is really important when we are setting that overall strategic direction. So if we move on to the next slide to set the context of from a financial perspective. Well, if we look at the medium-term financial plan figures that are up there on the screen, and this was the plan that was approved by the Fire Authority on the 19th of February. Our overall budget is just over £29 million. You can see for April 2021 to end of March 2022, we are suggesting that we will have a balanced budget. It would be late in the day not to have a balanced budget, given we're only a month away from that financial year. But over and above that, we only got a 1-year funding settlement from government. We were expecting initially a 3 to 4 year funding settlement, but because we only had a comprehensive we only had a spending round rather than a comprehensive spending review, we only got a single year funding settlement, which means predicting the funding for 22-23 through to 24-25 is fairly challenging. And the way that we deal with this is we look at 3 different financial scenarios. So we presented 3 scenarios to the authority a couple of weeks ago, looking at various levels of council tax, various levels of government grant, business rates, and of course various levels of expenditure in terms of inflation rates, pay awards, etc. But fairly difficult given the uncertainty around finance, the uncertainty around council tax levels, etc., to predict forward over that 4-year period. And you can see on a best case scenario, we are still predicting a deficit of nearly £1 million in 24-25. On a mid case, that works at about 1.5 million, and worst case, just over 2.8 million, which would make it be very, very challenging from a financial perspective. So that's the overall context of the financial situation that we're dealing with. If we now look at what we promised to deliver in 2020 to 2021 in our previous IRMP, you can see the list of projects there and how we've done with those projects. Remember, this a very exceptional year in terms of our COVID response. We've pretty much been dealing with an emergency major incident since the 24th of March. So by the end of this month, we're in a full calendar year of dealing with COVID, which of course has been challenging. But we did say that we would implement a day crewing on a permanent basis at Newton Aycliffe at Seaham. That came in on the 1st of January 2021. Linked very closely to that was the movement from an appliance from Durham to Spennymoor. So both of those projects ran successful trials and have then become permanent arrangements. We also ran a successful trial of charging for unwanted fire signals, and that became a permanent arrangement on the 1st of April as well. So, you know, some big ticket items delivered over this financial year. One of the projects that we haven't been able to progress, but you'll see it come forward in future plans. We wanted to trial a different use of targeted response vehicles. That's the model that we've got in at Durham. So we've got 4 firefighters ride on the first appliance, 2 on a targeted response vehicle. The authority have ordered 3 new vehicles, but because of COVID, we didn't get those into the service in time. In fact, they were due in around about October. We're now being told they will come at some point this month in March. So you'll see that project carried forward. We just haven't been able to progress that as much as we would have liked to. We said we would review the structure at middle and strategic levels. Again, that came into place in September when we moved from a district structure to a divisional structure, saved some resource from the overall budget from doing that. We also, over this financial year, said we would review the governance arrangements for the Fire Authority. We last did this in 2017. However, halfway through the year, the government announced a review of police and crime commissioners, and part of that is looking at the governance arrangements of fire authorities as well. So we decided not to progress that until we see the outcome of that national trial. And again, we should have that in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll take stock on whether we progress that review of governance going forward. And we've been looking at collaboration for a number of years, in particular with our neighbouring fire and rescue services in Tyne Wear, Northumberland, and actually Cleveland Fire Brigade have joined that consultation as well. If we just move forward to the next slide, there was also some things in the previous IRMP that weren't a single year project. I just want to give you a little bit of an update on them. So we asked the public on whether we should review our response standards. They said we should. Again, that work is ongoing, and you'll see it features in year 2 of the next CRMP. We also talked, and we mentioned this in a significant amount of detail last meeting, about putting more resource into arson reduction. The committee are well aware of the challenges that is faced across the whole of the North East. Well, we've introduced a new arson reduction strategy that has been a success, and we've had some good reductions over the last year, but we want to continue to focus on arson reduction as well. And again, I talked you through last meeting about some of the work that's going on across the North East with that. And then lastly, we said about our review and our approach to safe and wellbeing, and really focusing in on those at greatest risk of fire. Again, we've progressed some of that work, but we also want to reflect on the way that we've been doing safe and wellbeing visits during COVID, and those that are at lower risk have been getting virtual visits, telephone visits, etc. And we want to reflect on that learning going forward as well. So again, you'll see that feature over the next 4 years as a project. Okay, moving on. What are the specific questions we're consulting on for this year? Well, the first question really is an overall question around do people have any comments about our approach to CRMP and the way that we're allocating our resources? So quite an open question there. And then as we move forward onto specific questions, question 2 talks about should we continue to prioritise investment in business fire safety, particularly around protecting the built environment. Obviously, members will be aware this is a key issue following the Grenfell tower fire, and whilst the service area doesn't include any significant amount of high-rise, we do have high-risk buildings as well. We're expecting new legislation to be released over the next few weeks, and that to have additional legal responsibilities for the fire authority. So important that we continue to prioritise, invest resources into that area. Question 3 is the delayed project that we talked about from last year because we couldn't get the targeted response vehicles in. So we're asking, should we continue to look at the various crewing methods around targeted response vehicles, and then bring forward some suggestions about how we potentially use those as part of our overall emergency response. And then last question is again just asking, should we continue to focus around collaboration? Collaboration brings some real opportunity to deliver things in a more efficient and effective way. We look at the work we do with other fire and rescue services, but also with other key partners as well. So lastly, as I mentioned, we always get a consolidated response from the committee, but if members did want to put individual responses in, you can get information on our website or from any of our social media feeds as well, or email me directly if members do want to respond to any of those questions. Chair, I'll pause there and take any questions or comments.
Right, okay, thanks very much for that, Stuart. So we're going to go through those questions individually. Normally we'd like sort of be able to go through them in the room itself, but what I propose to do is we're going to go through each question and I'll invite comments. If anybody has any dissenting views, if they want to use the RTS button, or get in touch with Jonathan and we'll feed that into the consultation process. But Rob, did you want to come in at that particular point?
Yes, Chair. Rob Crew, representing the Blackhall Ward. I'm also Chair of the Scrutiny Management Board. I'd like to thank Stuart for bringing this report to members this morning. It's one of the highlights of this committee, hearing what the Fire and Rescue Service are up to over the years. I'm sure most members of this committee, indeed all members of this authority, will be aware of the straitened circumstances that we're working under, not just COVID-19, but also the funding regime. We know how hard it is to work on reduced funding, but I think that's made even worse by the uncertainty. I think that's the thing that really underlines everything we do as an authority. I'm sure Stuart will see that from a fire and rescue service perspective. So I would commend the work that the fire and rescue service are doing throughout the the circumstances that we're under. The one specific question I had, Stuart, clearly prevention is better than cure, and it's more the case with the fire and rescue service, I suppose, than anybody else. Part of your prevention strategy will be the safe and wellbeing visits. Now, you touched on that. Clearly, they'll have been reduced because of the pandemic restrictions. Has that increased risk in any way? Because I suspect most of those visits will be focused on the most vulnerable, and clearly that's a concern. Has that increased the risk any, and how do the Fire and Rescue Service propose to catch up on those and mitigate that risk?
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Crute. It's hard to work through, to be honest. And then the thing with safe and wellbeing visits is they're a long-term strategy, and actually we've been doing these for around about 10, 12 years now in a significant number. We really used our resources in a different way, increased the number that we have carried out over the last 4 or 5 years in particular. In fact, we're one of the highest performing fire and rescue services in number of visits that we do per 1,000 population. But what we have still carried out, even though a lot of our frontline firefighters have not been doing these physically during the pandemic, a couple of reasons then. One, obviously, we don't want our firefighters who might have been asymptomatic to pass the virus on to the most vulnerable in the community, and we do tend to focus on the most vulnerable, but also about protecting our staff as well. So it was a twofold strategy. However, for those that are the most vulnerable, we have a small team of community risk officers who have still continued to visit, even those who are really vulnerable. They've obviously done so with a significant amount of personal protective equipment. There's been specific procedures put in place. So we'd like to think that those that are most vulnerable, that we have mitigated that. We very quickly adopted telephone safe and wellbeing visits as well. And although we haven't done them at the same number, there has still been a few thousand delivered over this period of time. What we intend to do in the review that's taken place around safe and wellbeing visits is, for those that aren't at a high risk, at the moment everyone gets access to the same level of service. So somebody living in a reasonably affluent area that has hardwired smoke alarms fitted to their property, they would still get a physical visit at the moment. the experience that we've got from COVID, we believe that those people could potentially get a telephone safe and wellbeing visit or an online safe and wellbeing visit. There's no need to fit smoke alarms because they're already fitted in the property. So that would allow us to increase those numbers and also focus on those that live in higher risk areas or have some area of vulnerability, who would still get a physical visit by crews or by the community risk officers. So I think we probably won't see the outcome of this for a couple of years. It tends to take there's a lag period in there, but be reassured we'll do everything we can to try and catch up as much as we can, increase the work that we're doing once it's safe from a community perspective and also from a firefighter's perspective as well.
Thanks for that, Stuart. Thanks, Chair.
Thanks, Rob. Yeah, and I'd like to back what Rob said about the safe wellbeing visits. When we did the study that Stuart alluded to, it was about 5-6 years ago now, Jonathan. Went round with a few of the crews, and as I say, of all the blue light services, I would say the fire is probably the most respected and trusted. So people were willing to sort of forward a lot of information they probably wouldn't do to other authorities. So, and I know that information is being gathered and is an invaluable resource really. So hopefully post COVID we can get back to doing them, because as I say, like Rob said, prevention's a lot better than cure. Right, anybody else with comments? I've got Kevin Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. Mine was just a quick question on the budget forecast. You've got a good, a mid, and a worst case scenario. What inflation have you built in there for your increase in precept?
So in terms of a precept, all of the scenarios assume that the fire authority will put the precept up to the maximum amount. Now, we are held by fairly tight referendum limits. So we haven't had the same freedom that the police and crime commissioners have had, for example, to put it up by £12.50. We are held by 2%. As an upper limit, but we have assumed over the life of the medium-term financial plan that will be the increase. Now, we know that's a very difficult decision. The fire authority don't take this lightly. They know that members of the public are struggling, but the alternative could be some fairly significant cuts to frontline resources, impacting on prevention, impacting on business fire safety, and also impacting on our ability to put the same level of resource to respond. So we built in a 2% increase across all of the 4 years. From an inflation perspective, I think we've built in 2% inflation across the board as well. That's very difficult to predict at the moment. We are seeing some significant increases as a short-term impact around Brexit. So on some of our capital funds, when we're refurbishing statements, stations, etc., we're seeing increases in steel that's coming in from Europe. We're seeing increases in insulation material, that kind of thing. But it is quite difficult to predict what inflation is going to be because of the uncertainty around COVID, because we're still in an uncertain time because of Brexit as well. But hopefully that gives you some greater detail, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Chair. It wasn't meant in any form of criticism. I just wanted to know what had been built in there. Thank you, Chair.
No problem, Kevin. Thanks very much. Just with regard to forecasting, Stuart, you said that we need to do a forecast, but as you already mentioned, this has been an exceptional year. So how do we do a forecast for the next 2 to 3 years based on the year that we've just had?
Yeah, so Chair, we really look at a whole series of different assumptions. So we make assumptions, for example, around the level of government grant. So on that best case scenario, we've assumed a 2% increase in government grant. On the medium case, we've assumed a 0% government grant, which is pretty much what we got this year, which is why we've taken it as the mid case. And in a worst case scenario, we've assumed a 5% decrease, and again 5% was what we experienced through the first 4 years of austerity. We had a 5% year-on-year cut in government grants, so that seemed like a reasonable level around grant. We make some assumptions around council tax, some assumptions around business rates, based very much on the information we get from the two local authorities, from Durham County Council and from Darlington Borough Council, around the assumptions they're building in. We have to make some assumptions around pay awards. We know that, so for this year we built a 0% pay award in because of the government position around public sector pay freezes for people earning less than 24,000. But past this year we built in 2% per year. So all of those different scenarios are built on a significant number of assumptions. As I say, it is just really difficult to predict, though, what whether those assumptions are going to be realistic or not. Hence the approach with a best case, a mid case, and a worst case. It gives us a financial envelope to plan when we're in very uncertain times.
Right. Okay. I haven't been notified anybody else who wishes to speak, but I'm just going to go through the 4 questions that's in the consultation process. As Stuart and Jonathan's already alluded to, we can do this individually as members, but we're also going to put a consolidated effort as a committee as well. So the comments, I'll invite comments, observations on the first one. Do you have any overall comments about our CRMP and approach to allocating our resources? Well, I think we've been commenting on that one as we've been going along. So can I say we support question 1? If there is any dissenting views, if you can use the RTS or get in touch with Jonathan, and we can feed those as well. Well, question 2, should we continue to invest and prioritise fire safety activities to ensure the built environment within County Durham and Darlington remains safe for occupants and visitors?
Yes.
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 As I say, anybody has any dissenting views, you can get in touch those other ways, but I think we've got a bit of a consensus there. We're happy with that one. Question 3, should we continue to trial use and various crewing arrangements of tactical response vehicles?
Yes.
I'm not seeing any dissenting views, so as a committee we can support that. And question 4, should we identify opportunities for collaboration with local fire and rescue services and key partners?
Yes.
No, I can't see anybody saying so. I think as a committee we can support all 4 of those questions. And as I say, if anybody does have any dissenting views, if they don't support it, let Jonathan know, let me know, I'll use the RTS function. Okay?
Right.
Right, so thanks very much, Stuart. Again, under very, very challenging circumstances and the fact that we've only had a 1-year settlement, you know, we've just all got to try and do the best we can under these particular circumstances, but I'm sure we're in a decent position and we can go forward and with the safe way they have done in the last few years. So thanks very much for that, Stuart.
Thanks, Chair.
Right, with that, can we go to item 7, which is the draft Safe Durham Partnership Plan for 21 to 25. And Keith Wanley, who's the chair of the Safe Durham Partnership, is going to take us through this report.
Thanks, Chair. I'm Keith Wanley. I'm the chair of the Safe Durham Partnership Board. I've got a brief presentation to take you through the revised plan. So I'll just share my screen with you before I start the report. You should now be able to see the first slide of the presentation. So I think what's fair to cover off is why we've refreshed this plan after 1 year. As members will remember that we did put in a new plan last year, but after some of the reviews that's been conducted through the County Durham Partnership, we said back then we were always going to refresh it after a year and make sure that we align to the new County Durham Vision 2035. I think it's also fair that we've got to acknowledge the global coronavirus pandemic, which has impacted on all the services across County Durham from early 2020. And I recently gave a presentation to the committee on some of the response from the Safe Durham Partnership, so that's reflected in the plan as well. Also, the refresh will take into account to ensure that we continue to deliver services and utilise resources effectively to make Durham a safer place to live, work and visit. And the new partnership structure framework, which was agreed by the County Durham Partnership in September last year, that ensures that it aids the delivery of the County Durham Vision 2035. So all of this has been taken into account with the refresh of the plan. So the Safe Durham Partnership Plan forms part of the delivery mechanism for the County Durham Vision, and the Safe Durham Partnership Board adopted the relevant objectives from that vision, which are shown on this slide. You'll also note that we have included the joint ownership of making sure that children and young people are safe, which is held jointly with the Durham Safeguarding Children's Partnership. Behind the vision is the ethos that we'll adopt an approach to wellbeing across all partnership areas, so that we can empower communities, be asset focused, build resilience, work better together, share decision making, and do things with and not to our communities, and making sure that we also support the most vulnerable. So some of the impacts of COVID-19. It has impacted nationally on crime and illicit economies such as organised crime, terrorism, illegal markets and smuggling, human and wildlife trafficking, for example. Nationally, the total recorded crime decreased by 6%. This was driven by a substantial fall during April to June in 2020, particularly in theft offences. There was a similar picture locally with crime and the crime rate historically sitting at around about 97 crimes per 1,000 population, and in the 12 months to September 2020, this dropped to 93 per 1,000 population, which was a fall of 4%, and that was slightly behind the national average. There's also been an increase in some types of crime. So, for example, there were 11,000 domestic abuse related crimes recorded in County Durham, which is equivalent to around about 21 crimes per 1,000 people. And for the first 2 quarters of 2021, there was 7,900 domestic abuse related crimes recorded. Hate crimes have increased locally over the past few years. In 2019 to 20, there'd been a 127% increase compared to 2016-17. 437 crimes were recorded in the first 6 months of 2021, a 27% increase compared to the first 6 months of 1920. And 144% increase compared to the first 6 months of 2016-17. There's also been some significant court backlogs created by the pandemic. Some of the things that we've done locally to help address that, there's been some additional opening hours for the courts. They've implemented some new technology. So, for example, they've been doing video conferencing for court cases. And although the Crown Court remains a challenge due to the backlog, we have seen some impact on victims and witnesses, trauma of long-running cases. And what has been pleasing to see is that the support services have received some funding from the Ministry of Justice. So, getting into the priorities, as you'll notice, that the 6 priorities within the refresh plan haven't changed. What I'll do is I'll go through each of these in turn and just explain a little bit about why these remain the priorities. So priority 1 is to promote being safe and feeling safe in your community by focusing on the 4 areas of antisocial behaviour, safer homes, road safety and hate crime and community tension. As members will see, the road safety was included following the recommendations from this committee during the consultation process last year. So it was put back in following the recommendations from this committee. The slide shows some areas and examples of key deliverables, but what I'll do is I'd rather go through the priorities just to explain a few examples as to why the priorities. So, for example, with antisocial behaviour, on average, there's been 7,000 cases of antisocial behaviour per quarter. And that includes both the council and the police data. For the first 6 months in 2021, that increased to 8,700. Also in 1920, when we compare to the rest of England, the County Durham and Darlington Fire and Rescue Service area had the 3rd highest rate of deliberate secondary fires and the highest rate of delivered primary fires per 100,000 population compared to other fire and rescue service areas. We do recognise that this is a northeast issue because we see similar rates in our neighbouring services of Tyne and Weir and Cleveland Fire Brigade. Home safety. During 1920, the fire service attended 243 house fires and delivered over 16,000 home safety visits. Some of that was mentioned by the Chief Fire Officer just a little bit earlier on. For road safety, fatal road traffic injury collisions continue to be an area of concern. So even though in 2018, what we saw was the lowest number on record, as I'm sure everybody will recognise, that every single fatality on the roads is one too many. So we need to continue to focus on road safety. Hate crime and community tension. The hate crime incidents increased by almost 27%. Between 2016-17 and 19-20. There were 259 incidents recorded between April and September 2020, and that's the highest number in this period since 2016-17.
Keith, can we go through, can I invite comments on each particular priority, if you could take it back? It's just normally we'll get to the end of the presentation, but the fact that you're going to be going through each priority, we can we can do comments. I've got just the one comment for now. I like to see what other people say about this, but when you've got antisocial behaviour, safer homes, road safety, hate crime, it seems as though the fire, and we've just been discussing it at length, sits under antisocial behaviour. Should that not be a priority itself?
Well, the fires, they are linked to antisocial behaviour. For the primary fires, they're linked to criminal damage. The secondary fires are more nuisance fires, but obviously take an awful lot of resource. And they are one of the forms of antisocial behaviour. We do record it under with the PIs within there. We've just been reviewing the delivery mechanism for antisocial behaviour because we had the County Durham Strategic Antisocial Behaviour Group. But in December, we've just reviewed all of the subgroups and we're looking at what would be the better delivery mechanism for that. One potential is the County Durham Together partnership, which is looking at more of a place-based approach. But I do recognise your concerns, Chair, that you know, antisocial behaviour and in particular the fires, given the statistics I've just given, comparing us to other fire and rescue services, is a concern. My personal view is I think with us undertaking the review in the December and continuing that through into we discussed it at the January board meeting, I think we can manage it under antisocial behaviour, but it's obviously something that we'll keep under review as we implement new delivery mechanisms to see what positive effect that has. And if it doesn't, then it may be something worth to consider in the future, Chair.
I think it's, from my perspective, antisocial behaviour can stretch from like sort of throwing a snowball to something a lot more serious, and it seems to me that the fire to sit under something as like sort of innocuous as throwing a snowball, which is what antisocial behaviour could be interpreted as, it just seems to me it warrants its own section other than being next under antisocial behaviour. But I'll be interested to hear what other people say. I've got Joyce Charlton and somebody else. Christine, can you use the RTS function, Christine? But I'll bring you in after Joyce.
Good morning. The hate crime numbers are horrendous. Is that, it's just for my understanding really, is that because hate crime, as my time has been a councillor, has become quite a new crime? And is that because people are now knowing how to report that crime, or they are reporting it where before they didn't?
To be honest, that would be something more I would refer to our police partners and local authority for. Andrea, I don't know if you have any further information on that. Andrea Petty?
Yes, Councillor Charlton, I think you're right in relation to people knowing how to report hate crime. So last year we worked with the PCVC's office to do a hate hurts campaign. So what we'll be looking at over the next few months is to see whether that increase has been on the back of that hate crime campaign.
Right.
So obviously we'll be asking the Hate Crime Action Group to be looking at that over the next few months.
Lovely, thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, Christine.
Yeah, two things. In my area, which is the West Auckland ward, we have a lot of antisocial behaviour, which is being looked into at the moment. Hopefully we'll get on top of it. The second thing is, I've been in meetings where it's been discovered the connection between animal abuse and child abuse. Has anything been done in this area at all? Has it been investigated, or has anybody?
Councillor, I sit on the Safeguarding Adults Board, and I know that there was some information sent out through the Adults Board at some point last year, because there was there was the connection. I know I personally circulated it around the fire service, because if people are going into properties and they do realise that the animals are being mistreated and not being fed correctly, they're not being cleaned up after, then there is some correlation between, if that's the way people are treating the animals and the pets, then that could also bleed across into how they're treating children. So I know there was some information sent out on that last year, but what I will do is I'll take it back to the chair of the Safeguarding Adults Board and the Children's Board, just to ask them if they can refresh that information.
Thank you.
Right, we've got Kevin Thompson. Are you on mute, Kevin?
I've just taken off, Chair. Thank you, Chair. I apologise for not introducing myself earlier on. My name's Councillor Kevin Thompson. I'm the ward member for the Spennymoor and Middleston ward. My comments, Chair, would be around antisocial behaviour. I think as most councillors find a great deal of problems coming from that area. And I'd like to know just how involved the police are at this stage, or going to be, in the Durham County Council's Selective Licence Initiative, which hopes to try, among other things, to reduce antisocial behaviour, because neighbour disputes, landlord disputes, is a big factor in antisocial behaviour. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I think that's a little bit out the remit of this particular, because we're looking at the like sort of priorities at this time, but I think that's been noted and will be taken forward, Kevin. Bill Kellett.
Thanks, Chair. Bill Kellett, Sherburn Division. Chair, fly tipping. I've noticed in my area there's quite a lot of tyres being dumped. Just about a fortnight ago, we had 2 locations. The same person, because they're identical tyres. Is there no way we can recycle these tyres or encourage people to use them as a resource? Because I think rubber or whatever could be reused instead of just being a nuisance to the community where I've got to pay to have them disposed of. Thank you.
Yeah,
Chair, on any of those points, Keith?
Thanks, Chair. There is an awful lot of work being done. I know the fire service are heavily involved with the fly tipping task force, which is run through the county council. So these are the type of things that are getting discussed there. I know Ian Holt has reported that there has been a reduction in fly tipping, but obviously continues to be a concern. Which is why they have this specific fly tipping task force established, and that'll continue to run to help address that. What I will do is I'll have a word with me arson reduction manager who sits on the task force, and just ask him to raise the issues of waste tyres being dumped.
Okay, and finally on this particular item, I've got Councillor Crew, Rob.
Thanks, Chair. Just a couple of brief points. It's about, Keith, do we see any emergent or persistent issues relating to antisocial behaviour? And where do we get those reports from? How do we look at those work areas? Because I had a conversation with the chair of this committee just the other day, and looking across some of the PAC meetings in EAP areas, one issue that's coming through seems to be about quads, motorbikes and off-road vehicles going onto public open spaces, onto pathways, causing all kinds of problems. Clearly that would fit within the antisocial behaviour, and I accept that list you put up there isn't meant to be exhaustive, but this is one issue that's emerging, and I don't know how we map that, how we know which ones are emerging, which ones are becoming more persistent, and how we propose to tackle them. And the point that Kevin Thompson's just raised about the selective licensing scheme may be a little bit beyond the remit of this committee, but it is a valid point, because a lot of community tensions, certainly in areas like Kevin's and like ours, where we have a lot of private rented sector properties, the issues relating to those properties and the tenants of those properties do create a lot of community tension, and it is an enormous issue. And I'm expecting, if the Secretary of State gives the go-ahead, selective licensing really should make some kind of impact, and we need to look at that. You know, the impact of selective licensing falls between this committee, it falls between the Environment Committee and Economy as well. So it's one of those issues that cuts right the way across a number of thematic groups, but it's something that we do need to follow. And I do think it's a valid point, because we can make a huge difference with that legislation if it does get the go-ahead from the Secretary of State. And Joyce's point on hate crime, I think it is an issue. I don't think it's an emergent issue. It's been around for years. I think the problem at the moment is that it changes in form. The source of hate crime, it's been associated with a whole host of groups in the past. They come and go. At the moment, we're seeing the rise of the far right, the rise of fascism, and I think that's one of the main problems at the moment. And again, it's one of those emerging issues that could become a persistent issue, and we need to look at how we handle that as well, because it could grow out of all proportion. We look at now, I think Katie said a 27% rise in hate crime. I don't know what proportion would be linked to what's going on nationally and internationally, but I dare bet it's linked to the rise of the far right.
Okay, that was mainly comments, but do you want to come back on anything there, Keith?
When you were asking about the recording of antisocial behaviour, there's two different routes that it gets recorded in. One, it could get reported through to the council, and the other route is through the police. And the figures I gave you earlier on were kind of combined between the two data sets, because obviously we need to have a good overview of all of the cases of antisocial behaviour that gets reported. I don't have the breakdown of the different types at this time, Councillor. You know, when you mentioned about the reporting of quad bikes, etc. But I agree with your comments on the selective licensing. I was part of that group when it was initially being put in the bid. We were putting the bid together, and we were, you know, I think we're all looking forward to hoping that it is approved by the Secretary of State. Clearly, the different areas are designated for different reasons, and some of them, you know, one of them reasons is antisocial behaviour. So we will need to look at the areas that are designated for antisocial behaviour and see what impact that has. But I do think it'll have a positive impact. So I'll look forward to it coming in.
Okay. So with regards to Alison, Andrea, did you want to come back with something?
Yeah, I was just going to add to the chair's Safety and Partnership Chair's comments in relation to off-road biking. I know that is an issue that's been discussed at the LMAPs around the county. So it has been raised through that mechanism, and obviously partners looking at that issue and looking at a way to try and resolve the issue, but also work together with what we can do. In relation to selective licensing, we did have that discussion around those vision objectives, and that is one area that the Safety and Partnership will be picking up as well. So just to give some assurance that it is on the SDP's agenda moving forward.
Okay, thanks for that. So I guess it's how we sort of articulate these within the priorities. You know, that when I mentioned about fire, it seems as though that's a lot more serious than antisocial behaviour. I think when the selective licensing scheme, I don't know if we can mention that in the emerging sort of plan, and off-road cycles is a big issue for, I would say, across the board now. And you know, I think it's the readily availability of them and the fact that they're not insured when they're coming on the roads, and the damage that they're causing within our communities and our nature reserves and on the roads and on our sort of grassed areas. Possibly if we can sort of make those issues a little bit more explicit within the plan. So just quickly mention what we would like to take notice of. As I said, Joyce mentioned about the hate crime. alarming figures, up to 127% increase in hate crime. I mentioned about the fires. Christine mentioned about antisocial behaviour and whether there's a link between child abuse and animal abuse. Kevin did mention about the selective licensing, how we can go forward with that. Bill mentioned about fly tipping, and Rob mentioned about off-road bikes and about the selective licensing. So those are some points that we can take forward from this committee. If you can like sort of take them with you, yeah.
We've got them noted. Thanks, Chair.
If we can get on to strategic priority 2.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Priority 2 is to support victims and protect vulnerable people from harm by focusing on the 3 work areas of domestic abuse and sexual violence, organised crime and county lines, and then victims. Again, a few examples of why they are priorities. Violence and sexual offences are the most reported crimes at a rate of just over 40 per 1,000 population, which is similar to the North East but higher than the England figures. Recent figures for Q2 show a 5% decrease in incidents compared to last year. However, these incidents have been classified as crimes have risen slightly by 0.04 per 1,000 population, so it is slightly. Over 11,000 domestic abuse related crimes were recorded in 1920, which is equivalent to the 21 crimes per 1,000 population. In August to September 2020, there's been a 21% decrease in reported incidents. However, those classified as crimes has risen by 4.2%. There was just under 7,000 referrals to harbour in 1920 compared to the just over 5,000 in 1819, which is a rise of 38%. And there was over 3,000 victims of crime took up the offer of help from the victims' care and advice services. Is there any comments on strategic priority 2, Chair?
Has anybody got any comments, observations, or questions that I'd like to ask of Keith on this one? Got Rob.
Just a very quick one, Chair. I came across an article in one of the newspapers not so long about county lines. Now, apparently, because of the pandemic restrictions, it's had a bit of an impact nationally in reducing incidents related to county lines, and largely it's been about the streets being empty, so people, stand out a little bit more. Public transport's being used a lot less, and young kids who've been used in the past to relay drugs between one area and another, they tend to stand out as well. Is there any sign of that feeding through as far as county lines in Durham goes, Keith?
Again, I'm really sorry, I wouldn't have any details on that. Andrea, do you have anything from the police?
I don't have anything specific, Councillor Crute. All I would say is that obviously no areas are risk-free, and I know certainly on the outskirts of County Durham there have been incidents, but that's something that we can come back to you on, if that's okay.
It is an interesting point, though, because, as I said, for a long time, people weren't supposed to be driving about. So I suppose there was always going to be the risk if somebody was carrying drugs that they could get stopped by the police. So I think it will be interesting to see what the figures are going forward. Leanne, did you want to come in?
Yeah, it's just in regards to the county lines. I know we've been working alongside Joanne Malcolm in Seaham, and through our neighbourhood budget, we've funded some number plate recognition cameras at the entrances to Seaham, which will also help in the combat of the county lines.
Oh, that's really interesting. Thanks for that. Jeanette?
Strangely enough, I just read something this morning which was saying the opposite of what Rob was saying, which was that the prevalence of county lines and children being groomed is actually being increased by the pandemic, to the point where parents are trying to not even aware that things are happening until it's too late, and the fact that children are not in school is also another thing that's meaning that they're now available. It was just this morning that this article came out, so you know, I think it might be something that would be really interesting to come to the committee to give us all, you know, the true picture of what's happening. That's obviously a national picture, you know, it may be different locally. Thank you.
That's a really interesting point, and I think going forward, I think it is something that we could look into. Those were mainly comments, but are we happy to support strategic priority 2, which is domestic abuse, sexual violence, organised crime, county lines, and the victims? I'm not seeing any dissent in.
No, yes.
Shakes of the head.
Great,
We're forward. We're happy to go forward with those. Okay. So if we can get on to priority 3, Keith.
Thanks, Chair. Priority 3 is to prevent counter-terrorism, radicalisation and violent extremism by focusing on preventing people being drawn into terrorism, support the work to strengthen our protection against terrorist attacks and mitigate the impacts of such an attack. As members will be aware, the UK threat level for international terrorism just changed on the 8th of February from severe to substantial. There were 215 arrests for terrorism-related activity in the 12 months up to September 2020. And I think, as we mentioned earlier on, there's no areas risk-free from these types of activities. The safeguard and referral route for PREVENT remains the first contact number, which is the 03000 262 929, and that's for children, which is the same as any other safeguard and referral route, and then 101 via the police for adults. What we will be doing is adopting a new national referral form for professionals to use. That's going to be launched in April, and there's going to be some associated resources with that. So there's the online briefing and toolkit that will come with this. We're obviously not expecting members of the public to use that and complete the form, but they've still got the traditional referral routes to refer in with. Also, one of the changes that's occurred during COVID-19 is schools were one of the main referrers for concerns historically, but that's changed recently due to the lockdown, school closures and homeschooling. So what we're looking at now is to identify those agencies and organisations which should be in a better position during this to be able to raise concerns and refer in, and then we can provide some awareness training for them to increase the referrals.
Again,
are there any questions on priority 3, Chair?
That's an interesting point when historically you've been getting referred to by the schools. Obviously the schools haven't been. The kids have been going to school for this last year or so. Do we have any comments, questions? I was pleased to see that the example that you've used in the plan is for far right rather than Islamic. I think you're much more likely to be a victim of far right terrorism than you are to Islamic terrorism in County Durham especially. So I think I was pleased that the example that you used was a far right example rather than Islamic terrorism. Rob Croot.
Thanks, Chair. Could you prevent a little bit, clarify a little bit something I'm reading here, Keith, in the strap line there, prevent counter-terrorism. Shouldn't we support counter-terrorism? Has that been misinterpreted, or is the wording wrong? I'm not quite sure. It's a bit confusing.
The prevent strategy is an element of the counter-terrorism. I completely understand how that's being read, Councillor, and I'll take it back and have a chat about this. But the prevent is a strand, same as you have prevent and protect. So yeah, I will take your comment on board, Councillor, and I'll take it back and ask if that needs to be reworded or could be worded more clearly.
Yeah, I think it's just the way it's been phrased, doesn't it? Andrea, did you want to come in?
Yeah, just nationally, that's how it's said. It is countering terrorism. So obviously countering against the terrorism ideology or terrorism views or supporting terrorism. So it's countering terrorism. So that's it's a national term.
It's being phrased though. It looks like prevent and counter terrorism when it should be support.
We'll look at that wording.
Okay, thank you. So the actual priority 3, prevent counter-terrorism, radicalisation and violent extreme by focusing on the following work areas. We're happy with those 2 priorities, preventing people being drawn into terrorism and support the work to strengthen our protection against terrorist attacks and mitigate the impact of such an attack. We're happy to support that.
Yes, support it.
Right, okay, we can get on to priority 4.
Thanks, Chair. Priority 4 is to reduce reoffending, and this is by focusing on preventing offending and intergenerational offending, and also prevent reoffending. So we know within County Durham that around 3 in 10 adult offenders reoffend, and this rises to almost half for children and young people. So the reoffending rate in County Durham is 30%, and that's higher than the national average, which is around 28%. Between April 2015 and September 2020, the Stronger Families programme worked with over 2,000 families who were identified as being involved in antisocial behaviour or crime, and just over 49% of the families achieved a successful intervention. Are there any questions on priority 4?
Before I do bring them in, I've just got a particular point. You know, we've had various numbers with regard to the reoffending rate for children and young people. One report, we said it was about 52%, and now it looks as though it's back down to 39%. And I just ask how we're actually recording these, because that was a big discrepancy between the report we had a couple of months ago, and then it got back down to 39%. Is there a uniform way of recording these? Because I had a bit of a discussion with the acting Police and Crime Commissioner, and he was saying the way we record things in Durham is a lot more strict than the way they record things in other authorities. Now, I would have thought by now there should be a uniform way of recording across the whole of the police authorities, but I know some are recording them with regards to reported crimes, where others are recording them with regards to admissions of guilt, or if they actually go through the court system. So if you can just comment on that particular point, Keith.
Again, Chair, that's something I'll have to refer back to me police colleagues on to give a more detailed response to that. But I will provide a response back to the committee.
But it is frustrating if you can see the point that, you know, one week we're getting 52% reoffending for children and young people, and then goes down to 39%. I would just think if we had a way of seeing how this has been recorded. Okay, I've got Rob. Rob, did you want to come in?
Just a comment in relation to the point you've just raised, Chair. You remember just recently we had the National Probation Service come into one of our meetings, and they were talking about how the National Probation Service and the community rehabilitation companies have been reworked. In effect, they've nationalised what was once the privatised element of it. So those figures that you're talking about, it may take time, but we might see them feeding through next time we have the National Probation Service coming in, because clearly the whole host of issues, it's not just about probation. I think the way the criminal justice system is funded as a whole has a lot to answer for. That's beyond our control, of course, but a lot of these factors involved, you know, we'll see them coming out, I would think, next time we have the National Probation Service in front of the committee.
Okay. So priority 4 is prevent reoffending, intergenerational offending, and prevent reoffending in general. So we're happy to support those with those comments that's been made from the committee.
Yes, happy to support it.
Okay.
Yes, Chair.
The next one.
Priority 5 is for alcohol and drugs harm reduction. Focusing on I'll not read them out, but the 4 areas shown at the top of the slide, Chair. So some examples why these are priorities. There's around 2,800 opiate and crack users within County Durham. Drug-related incidents increased by 32% between 2015-16 and 2019-20. Between 18-19 to 19-20, alcohol-related violent crime increased by almost 4%, and violence against the person offences, which are alcohol-related, have increased to 5.5%. In 19-20, in the first 6 months of 20 to 21, we've seen alcohol-related violent crime increase to over 30%. So there's some examples why this is a priority. I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Do we have any questions on alcohol and substance misuse? Harm reduction. Somebody just put the name forward. Is that you, Joyce?
Yes, it is. Thanks, Chair.
Right.
The increase in alcohol and drug things through the pandemic, is that not also related to domestic abuse? Are these sort of crossover crimes?
I think you do see the crossover with alcohol and domestic abuse. The alcohol is one of these areas that seems to be cross-cutting across many of the priority areas, where it gets involved with various types of antisocial behaviour, domestic abuse, that type of thing. Again, I don't have the breakdown of that. Andrea, do you have anything further on that we could?
No, I would just concur with what you've just said there, Keith. But we can speak to our colleagues and come back to Councillor Charlton if that's helpful.
Yeah, that's fine. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Okay, John Turnbull.
Yes, Keith. It's drugs use. It seems to be a great growing problem, and we've seen them taking taxis out of Durham and coming out into villages, and all this drug paraphernalia is being left lying around, and there's very little action. We've got local people in our area that's been dealing with drugs for years. They keep getting reported, the house gets reported to the police, and nothing ever happens, and people get disillusioned by it. I just think there needs to be a bigger clampdown on the amount of people that's just walking around the streets with needles and everything and dumping them anywhere they want, because it does affect young children.
Thanks, Councillor Turnbull. Again, I'll take that back to the board, and we'll see if what action's been taken around them areas, and again we'll report back to the committee.
Thanks very much. It is quite interesting where it says drug poisoning related deaths fallen by 12.7% and drug misuse related deaths fell by 32.5%. That sort of backs up what Rob was saying, that maybe we haven't had the people coming across driving into our community. So again, that's going to be quite interesting going forward to have a look at. And with regards to the public health money being taken away, which has been instrumental in a lot of people getting through their sort of successful drug and alcohol treatment.
Anna Wilkinson, please contact reception. Thank you.
Apologies, Chair, that was our tannoy.
No problem. We were reassured by the reports to the budget last week that a lot of the money that has been allocated to the public health with regards to drug and alcohol is going to remain for the foreseeable future, and because that is vital, not just on a health but as on a crime basis as well. So we need to watch that going forward as well, what happens with public health money. We'll go back to priority 5. So we're happy to support those priorities: the prevention, early intervention, providing specialist interventions, protecting children, vulnerables, adults at risk, and strengthening leadership, management and governance. We're happy to support those 4 priorities.
Yes, Chair.
Yes, Chair. Yes.
Right, and the last one, is it the last one now we're coming on to, Keith?
Yes, thanks, Chair. The priority 6 is the last one in the plan, and this is to tackle and prevent cyber-enabled crime by focusing on the 3 work areas, again shown towards the top of the slide. These are important because nationally, almost half of businesses and a quarter of charities report having cybersecurity breaches or attacks in the last 12 months, at an average cost of around about £3,230 per attack. Estimates show that there were just under 734,000 fraud offences and just over 29,000 computer misuse offences, referred to the National Fraud Intelligence Bureau in the year ending June 2020. When we look at plastic card frauds, there was 58% increase in remote banking fraud, which reflects the greater number of people now regularly using the internet, telephone and mobile banking. There have been increases in cybercrime and fraud due to COVID-19, the pandemic as well, as many people are now working from home and using the internet more than ever. National reports suggest that there's been an increase in fraud especially targeting elderly vulnerable people, and that there's also been a number of scams directly relating to COVID-19 as criminals exploit the vulnerabilities of people living in the pandemic. So there's some examples as to why this is a priority for the partnership.
Thanks for that, and it is something that we looked at. Heather chaired the subcommittee looking at this a couple of years ago, and it is frightening. It is frightening what's going on in cybercrime. Jeanette?
Thanks, Chair. Sorry, I forgot to introduce myself last time I spoke as well. Jeanette Stevenson from Anfield Plain and Catchgate Division. It was just to check that this includes telephone scams as well, because that's a real issue. A lot of our older, more vulnerable residents don't have computers, but they are being targeted, particularly through COVID, through telephone. So is that part of this this particular priority as well? Thanks very much.
Thanks, Councillor. I will need to check on whether it includes telephone, because with the cyber security, there's ways and means of being able to scan the internet and being able to offer security around that. But I don't know, Andrew, if you know, does this include telephone as well?
There's some work across both Safety and Partnership and the Safeguarding Adults Board. It's not specific to telephone in relation to the Safer Cyber Group, but I know that some work with the Safeguarding Adults Board has included telephone frauds and other frauds, particularly to elderly residents within the county. So getting information out to obviously make them aware to be on their guard.
Okay, thank you. Kevin?
Yes, Chair, just for some clarification, what exactly does it mean by work with the voluntary and community sector to identify means of communicating digital hygiene?
So maybe we need to make that a little bit easier. It means things like your password, so that you don't use the password, you don't let people see over your shoulder what you're putting in your phone or your PIN numbers and things like that. So it's having awareness around that, and to use, I suppose, more complicated rather than your son's name or your daughter's name or something like that. So that's what the digital hygiene means.
I suggest that could possibly be simplified.
I think so as well. That's probably the worst phraseology I've seen this year, digital hygiene, but take your point, Kevin. With regards to the priorities, raise awareness of the general population about staying safe online, reduce risk to most vulnerable groups, and build resilience of local businesses to the threat of cybercrime. We're happy to support those priorities.
Yes.
Yes. Right, okay, so that was the last of the priorities. We've been commenting as we've been going through, and I'm sure Jackie and Martin and Jonathan will have been taking note of those particular priorities that we can sort of feed into the SDP. You've put on a slide there about the consultation, Keith.
Yeah, that's just to allow committee members to be aware that this has been out for consultation from January. It ended on the 21st of February. Obviously, it's still open to members of the committee, because I understand this meeting date was changed. So the part of the consultation process, we have tried to get a wide range of groups. For example, the Youth Council is enabled to engage more effectively with young people, and we have seen quite a good improvement in responses to the consultation from that age group. So basically following the consultation and from the comments from committee members today, we'll be looking at the detail in the plan, and then we'll be taking that back to the Safety and Partnership Board on the 10th of March for approval. I know you've commented quite considerably on the different areas of the plan. I had intended to ask you to consider these two areas, but I'm happy to take further comments, Chair, but I think we've commented on them as we've gone through. I'm just very grateful for the time to be able to present this to the committee today, and for all of the comments that's been made. We've noted them down, but I'm happy to take any further comments over these two question areas as well, Chair.
No, I think you're right. We've been commenting on them as we've been going through, and thank you very much for giving that presentation. I've got a couple of comments. Jonathan and, well, Kevin. Kevin, did you want to come in first?
Just a quick one, Chair. I've enjoyed the presentation. I'd like to just check that we will be getting an electronic copy of it.
Well, we usually get notice of things once it gets fed through. Jonathan, did you want to come back on that?
Thank you, Chair. Yep, Jonathan Slee over here and Scrutiny Officer. Just from the comments that's been made by members this morning, I'll be pulling preparing a response from the committee to send to the Safe Durham Partnership Board with those comments in. As members know, the timescale is very tight, so I'll be doing that within the next couple of days, and I'll agree that with the Chair before it's sent, and it will circulate a copy to members of the committee.
Okay, well, thanks very much for that, because I think this is one of the highlights of this particular committee when we do go over the plan, and we're going to have our input. And as Keith alluded to, it is taken notice of, because they did make amendments to the plan on the back of what we suggested. So thanks very much, Keith. Thanks very much, Andrew, as well, and thanks to the members of the committee for their contributions. And as I said, Jonathan will feed that up and we'll get a response. Okay. If we go back to the agenda, it's refresh of the work programme 2021 to 22. And Jonathan, are you going to take us through that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Item 8 within the agenda pack, refresh of the committee's work programme. This report we've historically brought to the committee this time of year. The report the report covers two areas. First of all, it looks back on our activity that we've undertaken between 2020-2021, and then starts that process of looking towards our work programme for 2021-22. The work programme itself is aligned to the priorities that's in the council plan, which a copy of that's attached with the committee's papers, and also to the report we've just considered there within the Safe Durham Partnership Plan. And in terms of those areas over the past year, the items which we've included, we've worked within the format of our remote meetings, etc. this year, and prioritised our work programme accordingly within COVID and COVID response. In terms of the work programme going forward, we'll work very closely with service groupings and also the Safe Durham Partnership to sort of bring a work programme together for that. And what we'll basically do is look towards the first meeting of the new municipal year to bring a work programme back to the committee and take any comments or suggestions that's made by members from today. Go away, we'll look at that and bring that report back to the committee in 2021 municipal year, Chair.
Right. Okay. Thanks. Rob, did you want to come in?
Yes, thanks, Chair. I'm pleased committee members are going to get the opportunity to put some ideas forward, because I think there have been a few raised eyebrows in the past, wondering why are we bringing this now right at the end of the full council term. But I think we need to have something to work with once we get back, or whoever gets back after the elections in May. So I think it's a good opportunity to put a marker down on what we might want to look forward to in 21-22, or you get me confused now, Jonathan, whichever year we're looking at. One of the issues that I mentioned it earlier on, and speaking to other members, and some of the reports they're coming out of PAC meetings with and AP meetings with, is this issue about off-road squads and motorbikes on public open spaces, on public footpaths. Now, it's going to be a complex issue, I would think, because we have a part rural, part urban county. We have a lot of countryside. We have a lot of coastline. There's a lot of public footpaths, a lot of heritage in the county, and the damage you mentioned earlier, Chair. The damage is, it's getting quite serious for what's going on, and that's not regarding public safety as well, which has to be the key point. People out walking the dogs or having a stroll, which they're encouraged to more through this pandemic than ever before, and they're being put at greater risk because of people going onto play areas, onto public open spaces, and onto footpaths. So I think it might be something we have a look at. It'll bring in a lot of partners, I would think, but the sooner we get started, the better. As far as the timeline goes, we will not be finalising our work programmes until around June or July. So it's just a suggestion, putting a marker down. And of course, we'll have to bear in mind how many meetings we're likely to have in the next municipal year. You know, at the moment we're meeting by teams. We don't know what we'll be doing after May, once the legislation or the guidance that we have on meetings expires after the first week in May. I don't know if we're going to be filing back in the county hall when we continue meeting by teams, but we have to bear this in mind when we set the programme and looking at the workload we're going to have through the work programme. But you know, if we're looking at doing a piece of work, there's no reason we couldn't do that on teams as well. But that's for the future, Chair. I just thought we'd put a marker down on this particular issue. I am aware it's a bit of a problem right away across the county.
Yeah, you're right, and we've spoke about it at great length, and that's something that this committee could look at. Historically, we've involved the members of the committee what our priorities are and what we should be looking at, but that's certainly something that has sort of merited a lot of discussion. If there's any other priorities that people think we could be looking at as with regards to a full-scale report or even just a task and finish group, I would really recommend that you get in touch with Jonathan and whoever's on this particular committee next year. That's something that we can start looking at. But Rob's definitely put a good marker down there. That's something that we should be we could be looking as a priority. But as I say, people can come up with other stuff as well. Jeanette, did you put your name down? Or is that Jonathan?
It's not me.
Oh, sorry, it's Jonathan. I just saw JS.
Is it just another point Councillor Chris just made there? Within that, I'll go and work with service leads and partnership leads on that and explore that area further. I know there's been a briefing circulated to members, but we'll look at it, get some further information on that subject area, Chair.
That's good. So that's going forward. With regard to today's agenda, I haven't been notified of any other business, but as I mentioned, this is the last committee before the election, so I would just like to thank everybody who's on the committee for their support. I'd like to thank Rob and Alison from the management board for their support for this particular committee. Our co-opted members who've always been really good with their contributions. Members of the committee, in particular, I'd like to thank Heather, because Heather's not going to be here after the election, and she's been a fantastic support as vice chair to me and this particular committee. So I'm sending you a big fat cuddly bear hug up to Sacriston for Heather. So thank you very much, and thank you everybody on the committee. I'm not sending you one, Rob Cruz. Don't worry.
I'm relieved.
Thank you, David.
Right, okay, so with that, thanks very much for everybody and their contributions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.